Okay, welcome to our SAP HCM Lecture 1. Today we are going to discuss what are the phases in a project. Now, this is pretty much important, although it's not technical, but the knowledge of this is of prime importance that because this is usually asked in the interviews, and the client also wants to know whether you are pretty much aware of the phases in a project. So, considering the fact that companies want to implement SAP, these companies then have to go through various phases. It actually starts with interviewing internally. The departments actually get together and they discuss and finalize and they create an outline of the landscape. Okay. The landscape means that how big is the company, what departments are functioning, how many people, what processes and functions are being handled and being executed in a network, in collusion, in cooperation, whether these processes and functions are integrated or not. That has to be brought under the light, and that are then formalized before any SAP or any ERP implementation has to go through, before any implementation has to start. So it actually starts with client info, what is the company, the niche, the industry, the hierarchies, the departments, the layout, the setup, the the spread and the expanse of the company. Everything is actually brought onto a document, okay? And it has to be decided what processes are important, what are not important, urgent or not so urgent, and what are irreversible processes and what are inexpendable processes or very important processes that a company cannot do without. So, for example, if a company like a Ford Motor Company has to go for implementation, it has to first decide how many licenses will be purchased for how many users, and how many consultants will be needed for supporting the entire global landscape for SAP software. So under scoping, what is scoping basically now? Everything that I'm going to discuss over here is not going through the SAP software yet. This is being done in the documents, in the boardrooms. Okay, so all the departments actually get together, they actually decide, they actually refine, they actually streamline and align all the processes of each and every department, nook and corner. Even they also have to see what user management would actually look like. Okay. And a user management will also then decide and go in the direction of user licensing and the pricing, and yearly maintenance is also a part of the scoping process. Once this is finalized, a document is basically collected. Now, there is no template or um, shall I say, a benchmark for any such document because every company has its own pattern, its own strategy to execute it. For example, if we talk about finance department, if it has to scope its entire process, collection, and it has to see what GLs are being maintained for what department. Like, for example, if it has to maintain GLs or a set of GLs or a group of GLs for HR, it has to then ascertain how many number of employees and what categories of employees are working with them, what are the slabs of the taxes, how the leaves are being paid or unpaid or being processed. Okay. Similarly, in other departments like inventory, they have to see how many materials, articles, groups, locations, storage mechanisms are being functioning and processing in a company. Okay. And they have to go through every piece of process, whether it's trivial or very important. Okay. And they have to go and put every process under the microscope. Okay. For example, like the procure to pay, it's a very important process for every company, the payment for vendors and so on. Then comes the phase two, where the audit teams basically get together and they analyze whether every piece of process has been collected and documented or not. Okay. The dynamics are checked how jobs will be shifted and promoted within a company after any ERP is implemented, and how the consultants will actually get the payment for their respective departments or the system. A project director basically is leading the entire operation that we just spoke about. So it's a very long process. It's not a day's work, and it does not actually happen in a week. It takes months and months for bigger companies. Okay. For example, like Johnson implementation. They will have to have the understanding of the project. Okay. And once all their, or let's say the Ford that we spoke of in the earlier slide, if they have all the documents, the as the document is collected, okay, once it is in place, and that document is quite big enough, it's a thick document of like 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 pages for every process that is in place, and that is a classified document. Okay. Once that is done, it is in place, then the demos are called for from SAP consulting companies, and the consulting companies actually come together, and they are actually shared with some important work, not all, and they suggest and advise process refinement. Okay, once that is done from like 10, 12, 15 companies, okay, then the bidding and quotation process happens. That phase kicks in. Companies like IBM, Accenture, Siemens, Telemax, VAUSNET will actually kick in and pitch in their quotation. And in quotations, what is included? All the modules that are going to be implemented, the profile of the experts, the change management experts,
Puneet bhai, I
everyone.
have a question.
Yeah, sure.
जो हमने फर्स्ट स्टेप में ये देखा है कि डेमोज, तो डेमोज क्या पिछले कोई प्रोजेक्ट्स का दिखाते हैं या किस
Yeah,
तरह ये डेमोज दे रहे होते
there
हैं?
are two kinds of demos. One is um, a previous project demo, which is not always the case because sometimes the information within those demos can be classified, and that can actually invite a legal action from those previous companies. And because there is always an agreement of non-disclosure that has to be, of course, adhered by, adhered to in every by every means in every scenario, in every situation. So, and sometimes we actually take up a certain set of processes for every module for that proposed company, the next company, and they make an hypothetical projection and integration of processes in SAP or any ERP, and that is then produced in a demo. Okay, and that's why technical demos, discussions, and going general discussions happen every now and then round the cycle, round the clock with the client. That is how. And sometimes a demo regarding relevant to the industry is given. Okay, that's how it is done. So the
Got it,
profile,
thank you.
yeah, profiles of the project directors, that is also submitted. So this is not rocket science. All you have to have is the intuition to collect every piece of detail that you can actually get. So you become a Sherlock Holmes type investigator about the process. And then comes in the factor of high cost, low cost. Okay. And the deliverable set is collected in a place which is what value is the company going to get from this implementation? What will be the product? What will what other technologies will be upsold to the client company? What product will be added? What will be the clause for support? What will be the training clauses? And of course, the quality is the main supreme vision, okay, the target of the company, even if it comes with a high price tag, because they want process to be smooth and paperless. So if, for example, IBM wins the project and after this, the demos are done and an agreement is signed and the the contracts are exchanged and there is an event kind of cutting the ribbon. The IBM company wins the project, it gets understanding of the project, which is it starts with a 0 day training management. That is where the management, the consultants, and the user actually get together and they start discussing about the process of each and every process department. Okay. Then everything comes under the light, under the knife. Like how many users will be there, what will be the costing of the license. And if you talk about HCM, the training HR manager, the recruitment HR. Now, these are departments. Every manager will then be set and aligned with their own positions, job descriptions. And this is done by the IBM team so that they can actually have the hierarchy in place so they know what every other person will be getting into and what processes they will be handed over when SAP or any ERP is implemented. Same goes for the inventory manager, warehouse manager. There will be new positions that will be created. Some old positions will be shifted or deleted, whatever the case may be. But in every case, a project that has come to the fore, the projects, basically the implementations don't actually eliminate jobs, but they create additional layer of jobs. Okay. So there are implementation partners, they have consultants, they have teams and experts from companies from IBM, Accenture, and so on. If by any means a client tries to avoid SAP HCM implementation, okay. For example, if they don't require or though they don't feel like having HCM or any other module, then IBM will actually hire different consultants to integrate SAP or any ERP with the current setup or customized software that they are running. And sometimes it is that,
Another question, please.
yeah, sure.
Uh, why would we have an implementation partner when we are already hiring a consultant or a team which will be implementing SAP?
Well, because when it comes to licensing, SAP has a franchisee model. It only authorizes companies that have a partnership with SAP and they actually are designated and authorized by SAP to distribute licenses. And those very companies, of course, will have their own line of consultant and teams to implement it. Yeah.
Let's say there is a company uh, which who wants to implement SAP, and VAUSNet gets the bidding contract, and why would VAUSNet would hire a implementation partner? Because I think VAUSNet is a authorized dealer of SAP.
Okay. Now let's put it this way. Sometimes, well, it happens in Europe and Middle East where SAP itself also jumps into projects and implementations if it is a big project and it distributes the licenses. Wasn't it will actually depend, will have to depend on SAP to distribute the licenses and the pricing will be discussed and negotiated with the client, with consulting companies in between, and with SAP because SAP is the principal, right? It has the right to issue and distribute licenses, and the pricing, of course, is also an element that is always considered because the more the users, the less the pricing. Okay, the wholesale rate, the retail rates, the renewal rates, everything has to be discussed, and this is not in the control of the consulting company. That's the reason SAP has to be there, and a consulting partner has to be there. Yeah,
Okay, got it.
yeah. So SAP licenses come with quite a lot of internal packages and suites. The authorizations are then aligned. These are made on Excel files and Primavera, where authorizations are then decided for every user. The interfaces are then decided. Okay. The consultants are hired. And of course, the shortages of resources, time, consultant processes, everything has to be discussed as well. So if we talk about SAP landscape, the system landscape, there are three parts to it. The development client, the quality client, the production client. The development is where all the customization, configuration happens, the testing happens. And it is then when it is clean and done and aligned with the process of the customer, then it is moved to the quality server where it is tested by the customer, where the customer is trained. And then once everything, every data is reconciled and aligned is then being production. Okay. And this SAP dev client, for example, or quality client, this client is not the customer, but it in SAP infrastructure, SAP landscape, it is the servers which is managed by basis consultants. They actually create logins, the user authorizations, and so on. So there are categories in development like configuration, development, customization, testing, sandbox. Now, sandbox is a place where you actually play with the process and try and experiment from every angle, the process of the customer. So sandbox is basically where there are no controls, but it's used for learning, for research. Okay. And uh, as per the standard, there are 3 to 5 instances of every landscape server. Even in dev, there will be a customization sub-server, subsidiary of that server. There will be a customization, there will be a configuration, a testing, and a transport client as well. Okay. And this is basically
These
managed by,
sorry, these landscape categories are there irrespective of if it's on-premise or on cloud
yeah,
implementation.
irrespective.
Okay.
So in the landscape, what do we actually configure? We actually configure organizational hierarchy, the employee formats, the structures, the hierarchies within the departments, the overall organizational hierarchy, how the process for payroll and taxation will differ from one department to another department. Okay. And that will be configured in the development client. So once in the development, everything is configured, it is then moved to quality server or quality client. Let's call client, let's call the server the client because that's how it is said in, that's how it is called in SAP lingo. So in quality, the testing and the training and the UAT is done. Now, UAT is one of the milestones of a project, major milestones. UAT means user acceptance testing. So for user acceptance testing, the test scripts are created for every process for every department. So they can be like hundreds and hundreds of such processes. And again, it's no rocket science. You just have to align and explain what that process is and how it was being run in the old legacy systems and how it will be executed in SAP with the steps, with the user end steps of every process, with the mentioning of the screens, the transaction codes, the screens and the fields. You, as a consultant, will be mentioning the input set of data and the output set of information. The format of as is process. Now, as is basically is that you study the present process execution of the collection of the process, the as is document. Whatever is being run and executed presently and currently at the customer's company is actually collected, and that was collected in a document. Again, it's again a collection of documents, a collection of process in a document, and it's a simple document that you explain each and every process with your instruction. That's what this process means and how it is being executed, whether it is important or it can be cashed out after the implementation. Then that's where your expertise as a consultant kicks in. After you have compiled the as is process, you actually compile a to be process, which is what is going to be in testing. And then you enumerate and elaborate the steps in testing. And you also explain the T codes, field selection, and everything of that process. Once that testing and training ends for the users, the user acceptance testing is basically carried out by business process owners who are basically the heads of the departments and who actually direct and train the user as well, and also highlight the major, minor, important, urgent processing for consultants to configure safely. Once the UAT is done, when the test scripts are done and 80% of it is passed, that means the process, the project is going ahead to the next step, which is the production, where 2 instances or 2 servers of PRD production is set up. where in the pre-PRD, the reconciliation process of the records, transactions, totals, master data management is basically one of the key processes that are being used in SAP S/4HANA implementations, where master data for every department, FI, HCM, material management, sales distribution, inventory, warehouse, and so on, are collected at a place and structured in the way in a pattern that is defined, directed, and refined by the people. Once that is in place, then of course it is then pushed to the PRD, which is the actual server, actual PRD, production live server. Okay.
Another question, can you please go back to previous slide?
Yeah.
Okay, the first point is test scripts. So, what does that mean? Who develops it? Who pushes it? And how are they made?
Test scripts are nothing but series of testing processes for every process. For HCM, for example, you want to test the hiring process. For example, in the hiring process in HCM, where the customer's present scenario is like they actually publish the job with a job description, and they have um, an email where the applications are received and those applications are shortlisted and the interviews are called. The background check is done. The candidate is called for another interview, and the third interview, if the candidate is selected. After the third, of course, the appointment is done. After the appointment, the orientation happens, the details of the company and and the candidate are aligned as for the payroll, the taxes, the leave management, the the holiday management, everything, job description, the details, the tasks, the hierarchy placement, the reporting to and reporting from points are also aligned. Yeah. So this is one process,
Okay,
and you will be actually putting this in a script that this is what is the process and this is how it is being executed in SAP and this is the result that you will get. So you will actually give everything like from input data to the output data that you will key in the name of the person or the personal number, and it will produce the record of that persona with the joining date, with the task, with the position, with the job description, with the hierarchy, with the department position of that person, and so on. So it has to align with the customer's old process. And if the old process is out of standard, then you will, of course, as a consultant, will replace that process with a better refined process in SAP. Okay, that is how we actually model a test script. So there is no set pattern or benchmark or, or a silver bullet to have a perfect test script. No test script is perfect. It can be rejected, it can be perfect, it can be acceptable, authorized, but there is no template that you can actually use all around. Which could be that could be universal. It's not like that. So every test script is basically defined and developed by consultant and the project manager using their intuition and experience. Right?
okay. So basically, test scripts are workflows
Workflows, yeah.
obtained from each and every department head about their workings in their own department. These are placed in a human-based language by the SAP consultants.
These are not actually acquired from the head of department because you have already aligned every here in the as is document. Now you're actually and then you have actually documented a to be process document as well that how it is going to be in SAP. So as is what basically is the previous legacy system infrastructure for the landscape, and you compare that with the to be the next projected structure of data in SAP or any ERP, and you compare that. And to align it, first process to process, you have to run each and every process from the old legacy system in the SAP, because you have already configured with your understanding, and whether to know it is a match or not, you actually run those processes under a test, which is supervised or say managed by consultants, and it involves the users and their business process owners. And they check whether this process, for example, like hiring process, is matching in SAP with the old system or not, or whether it is matching or it is better in SAP or not. So this is basically a script. Okay, it's a task given to the users and business process owner to check the SAP process and to critique it and to analyze it critically and to pass it or fail it or reject it or authorize it. Okay.
So, from what I understand, test scripts occur right before UATs,
No,
and
UAT is
after.
testing scripts. User
Okay,
acceptance testing, whether they accept the process or not, that is user acceptance testing. Whether they accept the configuration, the flow, the workflow, the front end, the back end or not, that is user acceptance. Okay.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead. So what is the architecture? I'll go a little faster because we are running short of time. Okay, architecture of SAP R3, that's for HANA. In R3, R3 means relationship, okay? And three is three layers, which is presentation, database layer, middle layer, which is again combined together to make a reporting big data layer. In SAP, there is a database layer, there is a RAM layer, which is of course a big, huge chunk of it is basically working. And now that three layer has actually reduced to two. Okay. So there will be different types of projects. The implementation project, which is that are also called greenfield projects. Then there are support projects where tickets are generated by users and those are handled by the consultants. And there are rollout projects where other companies basically get to have the copy of SAP from the main company that can have its own set of processes that need to be improvised or added into the present SAP. We have enhancement projects and upgradation projects, greenfield implementation and brownfield. The difference is greenfield is from the scratch, brownfield is basically where there is an older version of SAP being run and it actually takes much of the data from the layers of SAP it already has and implements S4HANA. Yeah, exactly.
I believe one kind is missing, which is blue field implementation.
Bluefield, brownfield, greenfield, brownfield, and there is another one.
Yeah,
Greenfield
the
is
third type is
maybe,
blue
maybe.
field implementation, in which we pick and choose from what we have to keep while upgrading to new systems, and what we have to discard. So it's maybe hybrid mode of greenfield and brownfield.
Yeah, exactly. It's about like when we call it. Anyway, so SAP implementations happen with ASAP methodology, which is developed by SAP Academy, where the project is prepared, the scoping is done by client, the consulting companies, the blueprinting happens. Now, blueprinting is that as is and to be documented, where all the requirements are gathered, the processes are gathered, and all the processes are basically the findings are mapped and they're done by functional and technical. Okay. The specification document, it all has configuration nodes, a consultant, an architect consultant, basically the head lead of the module, will actually enumerate, highlight the configuration nodes, the pathways, the T codes, the solution mapping, along with the standards. And if there are some processes that are not a match with SAP or not found in SAP, of course, those are identified as gaps. And if the customer pushes for a way around, then customizations are done, which is abandon, adopt. If you abandon the old process, then we adopt the new process. That is the SAP standard. But if the customer is pressing for going with those processes, and that cannot be done without those processes. Okay, if those processes are inevitable, then of course the customization has to be done. SAP does not really promote or encourage customization, and that has been done under this process called Bicep. Now, Bicep is basically a full form or short form for customization forms, integrations, reports. I can't remember what is W. Okay. So once the blueprinting is done, the gaps are identified, the processes are identified, the realization happens. Now, realization is working with the configuration. Okay, while you configure, the ABAP consultant will develop and customize. And then after that, once the realization is done, the testing starts. The scripts are handed to the users, the PPOs, to the management, and they start testing the system. Then comes the pre-go live preparation where the master data is collected, prepared in a pattern, and uploaded in the system. And then the go live. And after the go live, you have the post go live support. As easy as it is, no rocket science. It just involves your investigative skills to dig out and drill out the processes. So implementation methodology is important for first three phases, where in first three phases in the development server of client, you basically investigate the process and dig out the processes, and then it actually moves on to the testing in the QA server before it goes live. So what is blueprinting? Is the requirement gathering. Every functional team manually blueprints all the process, and that will be developed and collected based on client for the blueprint document circles back to the implementation partner. So there are requirements and processes that will be compatible and non-compatible with SAP. Then there will be changes in licensing as well. There will be grades in licensing that a certain user will have certain processes, a certain high super user will have certain access to certain transactions. Okay. And the compatibility issues are analyzed and gaps are identified, that some processes are a mismatch and that have to be customized, and that becomes a part of licensing as well. So gaps are analyzed and identified by functional consultant. It comes with the observation of business process. How many plants, how many workers, payroll scheduling, contract, permanent employees, remuneration system, and so on. Everything. I mean, you have to prepare a dictionary, a Wikipedia of the company, and that Wikipedia has to be configured in SAP. That's it. So there's no set pattern. Come down and implement, establish a working benchmark for collecting the cost. There is no one way of collecting. So after analyzing non-compatible process leading to the gap solution, changes are happening in SAP functional modules, which are not in systems, but on paper, which are to be approved by the BPO. Okay. After approval, then of course the SAP configuration starts. And if it is not approved, then the design has to be redone or reconfigured. After the approval, blueprinting is the most important phase in SAP implementation. Again, blueprinting is nothing, it has nothing to do with the SAP system. It's all documentation, a collection of documents. That is the specification document. And the technical functional guys actually have to put down the guidelines to be sent to the consultant start configuration. And functionally developed systems are also called business objects and functional objects. Technical customized elements are technical. Technical function objects are stored separately, transported to the QA server, and that is done by the basic consultant. User management is falling under the basic consultant. At quality server, team is responsible to test manually, find bugs, anomalies, gaps, compatibility, non-compatibility for transporting to the QA server. And this is done through the transport management system that we see in the system. After the UAT approval, implementation is done, the go live is done. 1 month to 1 year support can also be extended to the company. Tickets are then managed per ticket basis or hourly basis or on a wholesale basis. That, of course, is basically decided between the consulting team and the company. All server all servers are basically the system landscape are handed over to the client, and that is developed by this is consultant. If we run through the landscape again, The family of SAP family in R3, we had these modules. Okay. In R3, of course, these are the modules that are part of the SAP. Some out of SAP are called IS solution, which is industry solutions like IS retail being run by Walmart, SAP IS oil and gas, which is industry standard for oil companies like Shell, ConocoPhillips, BP, and so on. Then we have industry solution pharma, which are now customized solutions advised and developed by SAP for every industry. Okay, every separate industry, there is an industry set of solution which is called IS, industry solutions or industry standard. Okay, that was actually developed as packages. Now, SAP modules, in SAP modules, we have HCM and static enterprise management and so on. Then we have reporting, BIW servers, which is business warehouse. Now, this is a separate instance of SAP where the data is being pushed through extraction, transformation, and loading. And those are then designed and into blocks on which the dashboards are created. So BI is basically modeling of data to extraction reporting. That actually is used for reporting. Okay. That is the end of today's lecture. I hope you actually liked it. These are the
Yeah.
processes.